Hello, and welcome to the podcast Simple Enlightenment. I'm your host, Dean Graves. In this episode, we will explain the beginning, the purpose, and the nature of creation. The development and expansion of creation will be the topic of several upcoming episodes, and will capitalize on an understanding of the initial basics we set forth in this issue of Simple Enlightenment. In and of itself, understanding creation is not a requirement for advancing an individual's enlightenment, but the information can be a significant aid when confronted with the prospects of surrendering distortions that have been a pervasively accepted foundation for perceptions among most of the population for many lifetimes, and therefore important to recognizing and accepting truth. It's also helpful to know and understand because on Earth we experience a fractal experience of the bigger picture. It was always frustrating to me when in school that the subject matter began in a vacuum with only a micro perspective, and eventually, depending upon the competency of the teacher or teachers, might have expanded to a macro perspective. Of course, too much information all at once can be confusing or even turn a student away from the material. It is our intent to present the information in these podcast episodes in such a way as the listener has a macro vantage point from which to incrementally receive more micro information in the hopes that the listener can better understand the interconnection and workings of the parts. Also, by presenting the macro perspective of creation and then explaining how it has been refined to create our current experience, it helps us understand the significance of our role and contributions to the whole. It provides a context for us to understand creation and how the trials and tribulations we experience fit into the larger scheme of things. Everything has purpose, and everything begins and ends at the same place, with the one source which we identify as the Creator. This is the essence of the law of one, and at no point does creation become anything other than the one. To facilitate creation, the Creator projects itself as two concepts in order to establish a conceptual environment within which the purpose of creation can be fulfilled and the initial desire of the Creator satisfied. The originating Creator is the only thing that is real because it is outside of the conceptual environment. The objective for we who experience creation is to explore the self, and through that exploration learn who we are and perceptually reunite with the Creator by surrendering all attachment to distortions. Prior to the beginning of creation, the Creator is a mystery, and so we say that creation begins and ends in mystery. This may be unsatisfying to many listeners, but there are reasons that the Creator remains a mystery to us, which we will discuss in future episodes. What you can know more completely is you, and since all is one, learning about and becoming aware of yourself is to know the Creator. Knowing the Creator is the objective of all of creation, and until you decide to undertake the task of exploring and becoming aware of you with aplomb and cease holding a victim in need of a savior perspective, the Creator will remain a mystery. While we remain in time, it is difficult for us to grasp that creation has ended, or that the conclusion was never in doubt. Because there is only one source for the beginning of creation, which is the same as the end point, the outcome of creation is inevitable, but the nature of the Creator is forever changed because of what we, who experience creation from within, experience. We who are living lives are fulfilling the purpose of creation, with the prospects of determining the nature of the results but without the possibility of altering the inevitable conclusion. Because of where we are in the process, we perceive everything to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the reality is that there is only one complete simultaneous experience of creation without incremental segments. The inability to experience simultaneity is a limitation and a product of where we are in the evolutionary process, because the understanding of simultaneity requires the capacity to perceive and experience creation without partitions. Shifting your perceptions of creation from a linear journey or path with a beginning, middle, and end to an elastic ball with infinite simultaneous expansion and contraction capabilities may help begin an understanding of simultaneity. Shedding the propensity to categorize everything that we experience is an important part of the process of enlightenment. In the phase of enlightenment that most of us share, we learn everything by analogy, or comparison and contrast. We become aware of a choice between two things or concepts and choose between the two based upon which we like best. Having made a selection, the choice that we didn't select is discarded, and another choice is presented in its place. We then sequentially continue this process until we ultimately create a system of preferences that forms a unique individual personality. As enlightenment progresses, we begin to surrender the process of analogy. We won't surrender it entirely until we complete the enlightenment process completely, but like everything that we experience, it is a process. The more completely we are able to become awareness and surrender making analogies, the less stress we will experience and the happier we may become. Stress is the difference between our expectations and what is, and experiencing only what is living in the moment. In the moment is the experience that will provide us with exactly what we need to become more aware of and surrender the distortions that keep us separate from the Creator. A personality is a distortion resulting from the accumulation of choices through a myriad of experiences. While we are unaware of the nature of our personality, we remain in relative chaos, reacting to the choices of life rather than responding. We become aware of the nature of personality by becoming aware of the mind, and learn to observe the mind, the thoughts that it processes, and the reactions and responses to those thoughts. A personality is transformed and shaped by observing thought, exercising the analogy process with awareness, and taking control of the mind. The difference between reacting and responding is awareness, and it is awareness that propels us forward in our evolutionary journey. Everything that we experience is presented to us in thought. The input to our physical senses, concepts, our feelings are all experienced in thought. There is absolutely nothing that we can experience that doesn't come to us in thought. Thoughts are processed by the mind, and that is all that the mind does, process thought. To undertake the process of enlightenment within the individual self, it is important to become aware of the self and continually update that awareness, because the perceptual self will transform countless times as we do the work. The perceptions of self, according to the design of evolution, begins as a limited individual awareness, perceptually isolated and cocooned within a single body, but eventually concludes in complete infinite awareness in total unity as the one infinite Creator. The conclusion is inevitable because of the law of one, that all is one, because the process is a design that simply allows the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. How quickly we reach a conclusion and the nature of the experiences that we encounter between the beginning and the end are completely within our control. We co-create the experiencing of creation according to our degree of awareness and willingness to surrender distorted perceptions of self. Emotions are how most people interpret thought. For most people, becoming aware of thoughts requires that they first become aware of emotions and learn to explore the self through emotions. We use emotions to interpret every thought processed, and so learning to become aware of emotions begins a process of reverse engineering the awareness from emotions to the thoughts that we attract. When we substitute our image of creation from a linear process with a beginning, middle, and end to an infinitely expandable elastic ball, we begin to see how the infinite nature of creation ensures constant stability, with no possibility of creation's deviation from absolute balance. We gain perspective on truth because our perspective is put into the context of the infinite and shifts our perspective from a lower consciousness to a higher consciousness view. The perspective of creation as an elastic ball doesn't recognize polarity, but does recognize variety. It is only because of our limited perspective from within the elastic ball that we see only a portion of the experience, and therefore a perceived polarity. Our limited perspective from within the creation process is the result of an intentional design which, when combined with other characteristics of our experience, encourages us to be more creative and unique in our interpretations of experience. The beginning of an understanding of the macro picture of the Enlightenment process begins with the Creator's initial choices that began creation. Prior to creation, the Creator had a desire, which prompted a decision predicated upon awareness. The desire was to know itself, and the Creator determined that the best way to know itself was to experience itself. The purpose of creation is so that the one infinite Creator might know itself by experiencing itself. This purpose guides the structure of creation and satisfies the initial determination that it must experience itself in order to know itself. This requires creation to be a participatory enterprise that requires a feeling process rather than an intellectual enterprise, and to intuit rather than rely upon a rational logical analysis or observation. The process of enlightenment may begin with light or information, but if the increased level of information doesn't result in a greater motivation for an individual to become aware of the self and explore the self, it often may precipitate a reversed effect by serving as a reinforcement of the ego. Creation is a vehicle for the Creator to know itself by experiencing itself. As you listen to this podcast and live your life from this moment forward, remember to put the experiences within the context of this simple but complete understanding of the purpose of creation. Most, if not all, of the information we have to offer throughout this series of podcasts will be additional explanations of how this purpose is being fulfilled by the potentially infinite number of distortions that we experience as humans on Earth and as a small but integral part of creation. Knowing the purpose of creation is also the ultimate answer to the question, why would that be so, that we recommended you ask yourself whenever you feel resistance to the veracity of the information being offered. Having identified the initial desire of the Creator to know itself and determined the best means to satisfy this desire by experiencing itself, the Creator began the implementation of the design of creation. The Creator is all that is. Imagine if you are the one being and are all that is. How could you experience yourself? You, as the Creator, are the only thing that is. There was no physicality, no other beings of any sort, no one to interact with and provide you with experience. How could you possibly experience yourself? Ponder for a moment about how we currently are able to know ourselves. We interact with others and the environment. We learn to observe others conducting their lives, and we either emulate or reject their behavior. But regardless of what we accept or reject from the world around us, we rely upon interactions with that world to teach us about ourselves. We learn by analogy. In some way, every person we see or interact with brings us a message, and we choose to either accept or reject that message. But by doing so, we have the potential to learn about ourselves. If you are all that there is, you don't have the ability to interact with others, and no opportunity for analogy. Because there are no others, but because you are the Creator, you have the capacity to construct a scenario to accomplish your objective. If you are all that there is, you can't create a peer that also is all that there is to interact with, because there can't be more than one all that there is. If you were able to create a scenario that would allow you to candidly know yourself by experiencing yourself, you would also want to take the potential for experimenter bias out of this situation, so the interactions would truly be a mirror reflecting an unbiased and truthful reflection of yourself. If it were anything less, you'd just be creating a doll to play with. To satisfy the purpose of creation, the Creator created a thought experiment. It chose to distort a part of itself by causing a part of itself to believe that it is a separate being, but even so, it couldn't directly distort itself because it was still all that there is. If it attempted to distort its core self, any distortion would simply become a part of the whole and negate any intended benefit of the distortion. However, by beginning a thought experiment, the Creator could project itself as a concept and distort the concept of itself without directly distorting itself. Projecting itself as a concept allows the Creator to distort the concept of itself while retaining its core all that there is nature. It is a common practice in philosophy to create a thought experiment, to create a conceptual scenario that will provide the opportunity to examine a subject matter from multiple perspectives, experiment with what-if scenarios, and use as a mechanism to explore ideas without having to actually have a physical world experience. The Creator's projection of itself as a concept is the preparation and the environment for a thought experiment on a grand scale, which provides the Creator with the potential to know itself by experiencing itself while still remaining intact as all that there is. The Creator actually projected itself into two concepts. The first concept is foundational, and the second serves as a variable to color the foundational concept and potentially segment its experiencing of itself according to the coloring. The first conceptual projection of the Creator was infinity, accomplished by simply thinking the thought of infinity, but providing the all-encompassing conceptual environment for everything that will follow. The Creator, conceptually projecting the environment of infinity, does not imply that the Creator created anything real because infinity is a concept, but it causes us to re-identify the Creator hereafter as the one infinite Creator because it is the foundational perception on which creation is developed. The now one infinite Creator then projected a parallel concept to serve as a modifier of infinity, a second thought, distinct from the thought of infinity but paired with it. The second concept was intelligence, which in our participation in the thought experiment of creation functions in conjunction with the initial thought of infinity to create an environment for creation called intelligent infinity. All of the creation we experience, and there is an infinity of other creations, is constructed within the conceptual environment of intelligent infinity, and functions within the limits of its characteristics. Intelligence is a modifier of infinity because it creates a unique environment within which the Creator may explore itself. Within the same concept of infinity, other equally unique environments are created by pairing other modifying concepts similar to intelligence. Pairing a modifying concept such as intelligence with infinity compartmentalizes the foundational environment for creation so as to segregate the characteristics of one creation environment from other potential creation environments, equivalent to intelligent infinity. Intelligent infinity is the particular thought experiment that we are participating in, and it would be an ineffective thought experiment if there was bleed over from other compartmentalized conceptual environments. The implication is that there are other conceptualized environments, different from but equal to intelligent infinity, functioning parallel to intelligent infinity. An artist always has multiple canvases on which to paint. Those of us who participate within the creation that has been developed within intelligent infinity have great difficulty understanding or even significantly conceiving of a different conceptual environment of creation because our perceptions are programmed according to intelligent infinity concept. In order to perceive of the characteristics of another conceptual environment, we would have to be able to surrender and transcend the perceptions that compartmentalize the environment that we enjoy. I don't know if this is possible at the highest levels of awareness within the intelligent infinity environment, but it certainly isn't possible from where we are in the process. It's helpful to understand that the concept of infinity and the concept of intelligence do not merge into one concept, but maintain separate identities to form the environment. Every thought, regardless of whether it is the original thought of the Creator or a downstream fractal of the one infinite Creator, is contained within a geometric shape called a torus. Torus. The concept of infinity is completely within a single torus. Likewise, the concept of intelligence is completely within a different torus. A torus, or concept, can either maintain its standalone status and function in conjunction with other tori, or it can surrender its independence and merge into a new torus, or concept, providing a different effect from that experienced by maintaining its independence. Variances can be seen in behavior resulting from the same concepts when they are merged versus when they retain their independence and function cooperatively. A simple illustration of the potential of these conceptual interactions is seen in considering a whole and its parts. A table is a whole thing, but consists of the assembly of various parts to make it a table. A table is one torus, But in order to become a table, the legs and tabletop must surrender their individual torus. The torus of each part merged into the torus we perceive to be a table, thereby creating the new concept of a table. Up to this point, the conceptual environment for a creation has been formed, but a creation has not yet begun. The Creator is now the one infinite Creator, but has only laid the foundation for fulfilling the purpose of creation and experiencing itself. The Creator projected itself as two independent concepts, working in unison, but even the new concept of intelligent infinity is a modification, undistorted from the original source. Another important step must be taken to begin creation. Remember, the Creator, prior to its projection of itself as a concept, determined that the preferred way to know itself, the initial desire of creation, was to experience itself. But it cannot interact with and thereby experience itself while it knows that it is still itself. No analogy can exist from which to make comparisons and thereby learn, because there is still only the one Creator, now infinite by conceptual projection. And in order to experience itself, it must create the opportunity for analogy. And in order to facilitate analogy, the Creator must conceptually distort itself, so that some portion of its conceptual self could interact with its non-conceptual self while earnestly perceiving of itself as separate. In other words, even though the undiminished, distorted part of the Creator actually remained the one infinite Creator, a conceptual self must somehow be able to perceive itself as a different being with the capacity to make its own choices, predicated upon what it likes and or doesn't like, independent of the non-conceptual Creator. The Creator needed to be able to trick itself, its conceptual self, into believing that it is an independent being, separate from the Creator, and by doing so, create a vehicle that would allow the non-conceptual self to experience itself by interacting with the conceptual self as a peer. Remember that this is entirely conceptual, and there is nothing other than a conceptual projection of the real, undistorted Creator. In our physical worldview, this would be somewhat similar to a science fiction story where a person cloned themselves. The original you would know that you were the original and retain all of the characteristics of the original you. The cloned you would perceive the original you as a separate person and be able to act independently from the original you. The distortion installed within the conceptual intelligent infinity environment was again created by the Creator, projecting or thinking the first distortion into the conceptual self. The first distortion that began creation was the concept of free will. We often think of free will as the ability to think or act independently of other people. The dictionary even defines free will as the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate, the ability to act at one's own discretion. But we have the option to act at our own discretion only because we perceive ourselves as separate from the world and or other beings. Free will is more accurately defined as the perception of separation, which is necessary before we have the choice to act at our discretion. Acting with discretion is the result of free will, not free will itself. The projection of free will into intelligent infinity literally began creation. The original design of the thought experiment also established the template for further development of creation. The conceptual projection of the Creator, distorted by free will, retained all of the characteristics and creative capabilities of the undistorted Creator, as well as preserving the desire to know itself by experiencing itself, but created the opportunity for analogy and the potential to fulfill the purpose of creation. The Creator, distorted by free will within the conceptual environment of intelligent infinity, is called consciousness. All of creation is consciousness, which is simply the aspect of the one infinite Creator that perceives itself as separate from the Creator. Free will is a distortion within the environment of intelligent infinity, and it is variable according to its intensity, which promotes significant diversity of experience through analogy. Free will functions as an intoxicant, causing a greater perception of separation as free will is increased. The more free will intoxication that is programmed into consciousness, the greater the perception of separation from the Creator, and the more independent the resulting behavior. The less free will intoxication programmed into consciousness, the lower the perception of separation, and the less independent the resulting behavior. Consciousness is creatorness intoxicated by free will. The more whiskey we drink, the less aware we are of our senses, environment, and interactions with others. The less able we are to think clearly or function responsibly because the whiskey is interfering with our inherent abilities. It numbs us to who we really are. Likewise, free will numbs us to who we really are and allows us to lose ourselves in a false perception of the self, to act stupid and generally to behave as if we were drunk. To varying degrees, all people are drunk, but drunk on the distortion of free will. The process of enlightenment is the process of sobering from the intoxication of free will and becoming once again aware of whom we really are. The portion of the one infinite Creator now called consciousness functions as if there were a conceptual partition within the concept of intelligent infinity. Intelligent infinity is the environment of consciousness and pervades every part of it, but consciousness is not synonymous with intelligent infinity. Intelligent infinity exists independently from consciousness, but consciousness cannot exist outside of intelligent infinity. Initially, consciousness is an undiminished fractal of the Creator, distinguishable only by its own perception of separation from the Creator. Creation begins with the creation of consciousness because the projection of the concept of free will into intelligent infinity to create consciousness allows for experience in interaction between the undistorted Creator and perceptually distorted consciousness, which results in analogy. The projection of free will into intelligent infinity also serves as the template for further development of creation. As consciousness began to function as an independent entity from the one infinite Creator, it began to develop characteristics previously unknown to the Creator. It began to create a perceptual and behavioral pattern unique from the Creator, and since the one infinite Creator was actually only interacting with a portion of itself that perceived of itself as separate from itself, the Creator began to learn of itself by experiencing itself in ways that would not have been possible without having created consciousness. Creating consciousness also established the first subject-object relationship. The portion of the Creator that is undistorted is the object, the Creator as the object, and of course knew that it was the Creator. Consciousness is the creator as the subject, perceives itself as a separate identity from the creator as the object, and it is able to perceptually function independently. Consciousness at this level is an undiminished fractal of the creator, with the same desire to learn of itself by experiencing itself, and proceeded to develop creation accordingly. Consciousness retains the same motivation for self-discovery as does the undistorted creator, and proceeded to implement self-exploration through the further development of creation by investing increasing intensities of free will into itself. This has resulted in multiple layers of consciousness and has the effect of creating a series of subject-object relationships, reiterating the original subject-object interactions. The object always observes the subject and thereby learns of itself. The effect of creating multiple layers of consciousness was to create a scale, with consciousness at the top knowing itself to concurrently be the creator, while perceiving itself to be a separate entity, and at the bottom of the scale, not even having a predefined concept of the creator, but possessing an innate desire to return to source. We'll go into greater detail on the consciousness scale in upcoming episodes. Our earthly experience isn't on the bottom of the scale, but we are on the low end of it. We experience subject-object interactions with other people, the environment, and the world around us, and even as the inner dialogue within ourselves. We vacillate between being the subject or the object from thought to thought. Vacillating between the subject and object is our primary learning method, which is the process of analogy, or learning by comparison and contrast. The object perspective can be considered as the higher consciousness perspective, and the subject perspective that of a lower consciousness. By alternating the subject-object perspective from thought to thought, we experience two sides of the same coin and learn what we like by first experiencing what we don't like. Awareness is the tool to become aware of the process and to take control of this process by beginning to shun those thoughts and or perspectives that displease us and welcome those that please us. This is how we learn to use discretion and advance our pursuit of enlightenment. The more aware we are, the greater the opportunity to hold the object perspective and accept the light that is included in every thought. The less aware we are, the more lost within the illusion of creation, the less able we are to pay attention and recognize the lessons being brought to us. The choice of either the subject or object view of every thought is how we create our individual uniqueness, just as the original creator as the subject began to create its own pattern of uniqueness. Awareness is the tool that allows us to surrender our perception of separation and assume more frequently the object role over the subject. The process of enlightenment requires us to be aware of our thoughts, surrendering the propensity to experience the thought as the subject, and employ our awareness to experience thought as the object. Increased enlightenment is the natural result of undertaking this thought-by-thought exercise. We surrender our perception of separation and learn who we really are. Through the process of enlightenment, we gain nothing because we already are all that is, but we must surrender the distortions that keep us from knowing and experiencing infinity. Consciousness has experiences and interprets them in ways that are unique to Creator as the object. This allowed the Creator as the object to learn of itself in ways that wouldn't have been available had the subject-object relationship not been established. Because of the uniqueness of consciousness's perceptions, consciousness began to form a pattern, or more clearly identified as a pattern of consciousness, and with each new interpretation of experience further enhanced the uniqueness of the pattern. The Creator's mechanism to permit it to learn of itself by experiencing itself was successful in producing the desired results, so it decided to put the plan into full production mode by projecting the concept of manyness. Until this point in the creation process, as experienced within the intelligent infinity environment, there was only the Creator as the object and one Creator as the subject, consciousness. The concept of manyness is simply the reiteration of the original subject-object relationship an infinite number of times, which produced an infinite number of different patterns of consciousness, all following the same basic design to create an infinite number of creations. The infinite number of subject-object relationships between the Creator as the object and consciousness, or the Creator as the subject, are all within the single concept of intelligent infinity. Since other characteristics of the Creator have been paired with infinity to create other conceptual environments equivalent to intelligent infinity, each one seeded with an infinite number of projections of free will, creating a different Creator as the subject and resulting in an infinite number of creations, we lack a descriptive word for what this entire system would be called other than the totality of creation, because it is potentially vast beyond our wildest imagination. Creations are not to be confused with a universe. In future episodes, we shall explain the formation of a universe, which is part of a creation and also infinite, but within the infinity of creations. Please join us for the next episode of Simple Enlightenment as we continue to explain the creation that we all share, from the macro to the micro. In the next episode, we shall continue to discuss the structure of our creation and some of the other distortions that allow us to be the agents of consciousness and fulfill the purpose of creation. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying Simple Enlightenment and would like to see us continue to offer more information, we encourage you to help us financially, supporting what we are doing. Prior to beginning this enterprise, I naively thought that all that was necessary to produce a podcast was sit down in front of a microphone and begin to talk, but there is much more than meets the eye. The actual recording is only a small part of the effort to bring you this information, most of which takes money. Please enable us to continue this series and improve the product that we deliver to you by going to podcastenlightenment.org, our website, to make a contribution. There you will find free downloads of transcripts of every episode, additional information, suggested readings, and more, all free, of course. Every contribution helps, and as always, thank you for wanting to make the world a better place. If you or your group would like to sponsor a live presentation in your hometown, where you will have an opportunity to ask questions or receive additional clarifications of topics or subject matter that we have or have not covered, please email us at dean.graves, Graves, at podcastenlightenment.org, or visit our website at podcastenlightenment.org for more information. We leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator.